They didn't die all at once. They died slowly, one by one, in the snow. And when there was nothing left to eat, they made a decision that would haunt history forever. This is the story of the Donner Party. In 1846, America was obsessed with one idea: go west. Stories of rich farmland, endless opportunity, and a better life were spreading across the country like wildfire. Thousands of families packed their belongings into wooden wagons and began the dangerous journey toward California. Among them were the Donner and Reed families, men, women, and children. Most were ordinary people chasing the same dream, a fresh start. At first, the journey felt almost hopeful. The wagon trains moved slowly across open plains beneath enormous skies. Campfires lit the nights. Children ran beside the wagons. People laughed, sang, and believed the hardest part of the journey was already behind them. But the American frontier had a way of punishing confidence. The trail west was brutal, even under perfect conditions. People died from disease. Wagons broke apart. Oxen collapsed from exhaustion, and the farther west they traveled, the more dangerous the land became. Still, the group kept moving, because ahead of them was California, and they believed paradise was waiting there. Somewhere along the trail, the group heard about a man named Lansford Hastings. Hastings claimed he had discovered a faster route to California, a shortcut. It promised to save time and avoid parts of the traditional trail. For exhausted travelers desperate to reach California before winter, it sounded perfect. There was only one problem. Almost nobody had actually tested the route. Even worse, Hastings himself wasn't there to guide them. But by then, many members of the wagon train were tired of delays. They believed taking the shortcut could put them ahead of everyone else. So they made the decision that would destroy their lives. They turned off the main trail. At first, nothing seemed wrong. Then the terrain changed. The wagons were forced into rough wilderness with no proper roads. Thick brush tore at wheels and animals. Families spent entire days cutting paths through forests by hand. Progress became painfully slow. Food supplies began disappearing faster than expected. Oxen weakened. Tempers rose. And for the first time, people started realizing something horrifying. The shortcut was making the journey longer. Weeks passed. The group was now dangerously behind schedule. Every delay pushed them closer to winter. The heat of the desert punished both people and animals. Some wagons had to be abandoned completely. Oxen died where they stood, too exhausted to continue. The trail itself seemed cursed. Children became sick. Arguments exploded between families. People began blaming one another for the disaster unfolding around them, and still, they kept moving west, because turning back now was impossible. Then came the worst section of all, the crossing near the Great Salt Lake Desert. The shortcut forced them into a brutal stretch of salt flats and empty wilderness, where water was scarce and the heat felt endless. Animals wandered off and disappeared. Wheels cracked beneath the pressure. Some people reportedly walked for miles beside the wagons because the animals were too weak to pull extra weight. By the time they finally escaped the desert, they had lost precious weeks. And ahead of them, rising in the distance like a wall between them and survival, stood the snow-covered peaks of the Sierra Nevada. Winter was waiting for them there. By the time the group reached the Sierra Nevada, winter had already arrived. Snow began falling heavily across the mountains. At first, many believed it would pass. It didn't. Within days, the trail ahead disappeared beneath massive drifts of snow. Wagons could no longer move. Oxen collapsed in the freezing cold. The mountain pass was completely blocked. The group was trapped, and the storms kept coming. Snow piled higher and higher around the camps, burying wagons and cutting the families off from the outside world. Some built crude shelters from logs and animal hides. Others stayed inside freezing cabins barely strong enough to survive the storms. Food was already running low. Now there was almost no chance of finding more. The mountains had become a prison, and winter was only beginning. The first thing to disappear was hope. Then the food. The families began rationing everything they had left. Tiny scraps of meat, pieces of leather, even animal bones were boiled repeatedly in desperate attempts to make something edible. Children cried from hunger through the nights. Adults grew weaker every day. Some could barely stand anymore. Outside, the snow continued falling in silence. Inside the cabins, people watched one another slowly starve. Disease spread quickly through the camps. Frostbite blackened fingers and toes. The cold never truly left their bodies. And then, the deaths began. One by one, people stopped waking up. Families buried the dead beneath the snow when they could. But eventually, the ground became too frozen to dig. The bodies remained close to the living. And as the hunger worsened, a terrifying possibility began forming in everyone's mind, even if nobody wanted to say it out loud. In December, a small group attempted to escape the mountains on foot. Later, they would become known as the Forlorn Hope. Men, women, and children tied makeshift snowshoes to their feet and walked into the frozen wilderness searching for rescue. But the mountains showed no mercy. Blizzards blinded them, starvation weakened them, some collapsed directly into the snow and never stood up again. Soon, the survivors faced the same impossible reality as those trapped in the camps. There was no food left, and then the line between survival and horror disappeared. The dead became the only source of food remaining. Some refused at first, others could no longer afford to. It was a decision made in desperation, but one that would follow the survivors forever. Back at the camps, conditions continued getting worse. More people died from starvation and exposure. Parents watched children waste away in front of them, and somewhere beneath the endless snow of the Sierra Nevada. In February of 1847, rescuers finally reached the camps. What they found shocked them. The cabins were buried in snow. Survivors were too weak to stand. Many looked more dead than alive. Children sat beside bodies that had been frozen for weeks. Some survivors could barely speak. Others stared silently into the distance, completely broken by what they had lived through. Rescue teams began carrying people out of the mountains in small groups. But the journey was still dangerous, and not everyone survived long enough to leave. Several rescue missions were needed before the last survivors were finally brought down from the Sierra Nevada. By the end of the disaster, nearly half of the original group was dead, and the stories coming out of the mountains quickly spread across America. Stories of starvation, of impossible choices, and of what human beings are capable of when survival becomes the only thing left. More than 175 years later, the story of the Donner Party still feels difficult to understand. Not because the snow trapped them, not because they were starving, but because, in the end, the line between survival and horror became almost impossible to see. And somewhere beneath the silence of those mountains, the memory of what happened there never truly disappeared. The survivors waited for rescue, unsure if it would ever come. If you love historical mysteries and unexplained stories, hit like and subscribe